6. Vintage car graveyard. There's a vintage car graveyard found in western Germany, situated near the city of Dusseldorf in a forest. There's exactly 50 classic cars here, no more, no less. The graveyard's inventory includes beauties like a 1950s Willys M38 Jeep, a classic Jaguar XK120, a vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn, and many more. But cars aren't the only thing you'll find here. Interestingly, there's a piece of the famous Berlin Wall, and even a British K6 phone booth from the 1950s. Among the dilapidated remains of this junkyard, there's a plane with a recognizable paint job. It looks like it has a shark face, and is similar to the planes used by the Flying Tigers between 1941 and 1942. Judging by the perfect condition of its propellers though, the plane has likely never flown before. What's strange about this place is that even though the cars and vehicles seem like they've been completely abandoned in the forest, someone does actually own them. Everything in this vehicle graveyard belongs to none other than Michael Froelich, an automobile expert and a classic car lover. He owns the land where the vehicles are parked, and he deliberately left them in the woods at the hands of Mother Nature. Froelich is a former philosopher, artist, fashion designer, and racer, but these days he's known for being a skilled restorer and car dealer. While Froelich could be driving around in an expensive, luxurious vehicle if he wanted, he chooses to use a charred Rolls-Royce that was almost incinerated when his dealership burned to the ground back in 2005. The enthusiast has written multiple reference books, and he's also traveled around the world looking for unique vehicles to add to his growing collection. He calls his graveyard, located in the Neander Valley, his auto sculpture park. His museum is surrounded by a high-security fence, and it's in a wooded hillside right next to Froelich's home. All 50 cars from his collection, as well as the plane, were moved in the year 2000, when Froelich turned 50 years old. And, interestingly enough, every vehicle he owns was made in 1950, the same year he was born. Many of them were operating when they were parked in the woods, but will likely never be driven again. Froelich spoke with Spiegel International in 2009 and said they're like my brothers while speaking about the cars. He explained that nature is stronger than technology, and he wanted to showcase this idea in his personal vehicle museum. Car fans, TV crews, and photographers were invited to the park's opening, but the place has rarely let the public in since. Apparently, the only way to get access to the museum is by contacting Froelich himself and requesting a visit. Every vehicle on the property has a unique and interesting story about its past and how it was discovered, and Froelich can tell you everything you want to know. If this seems like somewhere you'd like to explore one day, he could even be your personal tour guide. You just have to get on the man's good side first. 5. 100-year-old ship. In 2019, Tom Fisher and his son Ross found a 100-year-old buried ship on their 17-acre property in Nash County, North Carolina. The Fishers found the wooden boat buried in the mud after a drought exposed it. The ship was 94 feet long, and they found out that it was once called the Robinson Gold Dredge. The vessel was used during the gold rush in the early 1900s in the eastern half of the state, but the boat was later abandoned. Since making the shocking discovery, Tim and Ross have continued to dig around the same area and have uncovered some interesting artifacts. The father-son duo gathered a dedicated group of friends who've worked with the EPA and state to carefully dig and expose the site, discovering treasure along the way. According to Tim, there was fine gold found inside the ship. It was in an area where the deck used to be before rotting away. The crew also uncovered a perfectly intact mason jar with a silver spoon inside. The Fishers are now planning to preserve the artifacts they find in a small on-site museum. They also want to rebuild the two-story ship that was once buried in the mud. Tim explained to ABC 11 how they'd welcome visitors who want to see the boat, but in the near future they plan to expand things to make it more public. Ross Fisher opened the NC Treasure Hunters campground in the same area the ship was found, and he even has a dedicated Facebook page for it. On a pinned post, prices are listed for all the fun activities they offer at their campgrounds. If you ever decide to visit this unique place in the middle of North Carolina, you can choose from activities like gold panning or searching for fossils, all for a small fee, of course. 4. Kruunuvuori Ghost Town. One of Helsinki, Finland's best-kept secrets is Kruunuvuori, a spooky ghost town out in the woods that's full of abandoned villas and the burnt remains of old seasonal homes for wealthy vacationers. The town has been forgotten about for decades, and its dilapidated villas have been left to stand Mother Nature's mercy. Situated about 2 miles from the city's center, the collection of abandoned vacation homes continue to struggle against time and the elements as years pass by. Kruunuvuori was first founded in the late 19th century when eastern Helsinki was just forests and fields. The breathtaking coastline and lush greenery made the town a paradise. And in 1900, Albert Goldbeck Lowen, a German businessman, bought the land. Albert then developed a resort for wealthy Germans and the upper class who lived nearby at the time. But soon, Kruunuvuori became available to hard-working middle-class citizens as well. As part of the armistice between the Soviet Union and Germany, Kruunuvuori fell to Finland's Communist Party shortly after World War II. For a little while, it became a holiday resort for party members. Then, in 1955, R.J. Aarnio was given full ownership of the area, and he had the bright idea to turn the place into a residential space capable of housing thousands of people. But the villas that were already on the land still belonged to their former owners. The community remained active and vibrant for a time, but then a feeling of dread and uncertainty started to fill the town. Buildings were neglected and proper maintenance was no longer taken care of. Apparently, Aarnio's construction plans were paused by zoning laws, and their negative successive building permit drove him to lose interest in the project entirely. Over time, people left Kruunuvuori and silently the town on the mountain began to disappear from memory. These days, you can still find most of the old structures in the Helsinki forest. All the villas and buildings are exactly where they used to be, only now they're covered in dust and debris and have started to deteriorate. Many of the buildings have graffiti on them, and it looks as though the homes have been ransacked. Not much is left inside the abandoned villas, only outdated furniture and old wood-burning fireplaces that likely haven't been used since the 1970s. Would you ever visit a ghost town in the woods? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. 3. Shaker rock piles. Several impressive rock piles litter the forest surrounding Shaker Village in Canterbury, New Hampshire. According to Marshall Hudson with New Hampshire magazine, the piles predate motorized equipment. The stones were stacked together perfectly somehow, likely by a skilled stonemason. Some of the piles are shaped like haystacks, while others look like giant meatballs. Many of the rocks here are way too heavy for any one person to have moved alone, so it's possible that a small group of people worked together. The labor must have been absolutely exhausting, so whatever they were doing it for had to have been important. Luckily, thanks to old records kept at Shaker Village, the true story behind these piles has been revealed. A former soldier named Peter Ayers embraced the Shaker faith in 1787, and he entered the New York Mount Lebanon Shaker Society. He lived there until 1792, when he was sent to New Hampshire to organize a group at Canterbury. He took on a few different roles while there, including hatmaker and schoolteacher. Ayers also operated water-powered mills, built dams, and raised a variety of livestock. But by 1818, the new Shaker community's mills were up and running, and Ayers found himself with a lot more time on his hands. Now, back to the mysterious rock piles. According to some of Ayers' personal journals, the man suffered from PTSD, although this condition was not well recognized in his time. He served as a soldier back in the 1900s, so who knows what he might have seen. While building the stone piles was partly for agricultural purposes, as Ayers was clearing an isolated spot of ground, it was also a way for him to cope with his many inner demons. The physical exertion of stacking stones, along with Ayers' isolation and the sense of accomplishment he felt while looking at his giant stone heaps, kept the man's bad thoughts at bay. Shakers were not allowed to marry or have any children, and everyone that belongs to the faith chooses a life of celibacy. So it makes sense that Ayers would try and find something to do with all that free time. In this case, he chose to stack hundreds of rocks together in order to create giant stone piles. Wouldn't be our first option, but hey, whatever floats his boat. 2. Creepy dolls. Imagine going for a calm walk in the woods only to find multiple baby dolls tied to trees, like out of a horror movie. This exact situation happened to a 64-year-old woman from England in January 2021. The woman isn't named in the story, but she made the frightening discovery while exploring an area around Cannock Chase in Staffordshire, England. She was walking through the undergrowth when she came to a sudden clearing where several trees stood with baby dolls on them. Some were nailed and some were tied up. The woman spoke with Black Country Live and described the scene. She explained that the dolls were situated in a very specific order, and some of them were bare, while others wore strange, green, raggedy clothes. The woman, who's a theatre practitioner at Walsall Manor Hospital, claimed that she saw a sign while coming out of the woods that said the area was once the operating theatre for the Old Ministry Pensions Hospital. The facility closed its doors during the late 1920s, and after that, all the buildings were bought by the owners of a nearby coal mine in order to house miners and their families. The site was called Brindley Village, and it even had a school and functioning men's club. The residents of the town would then move to the outskirts of Hednesford in the early 1950s, where a new housing estate was created. The woman had no idea who put the baby dolls on the trees, but she didn't feel any negative energy coming from them while she was there. She even returned to the site later on and said her prayers, wishing all the children who once lived in the village eternal rest. 1. Crashed plane hike. In North Carolina, there's a hike that leads you straight to an old plane crash. The aircraft apparently crashed in 1983 and has been there ever since. Spanning 469 miles, the Blue Ridge Parkway offers a long list of outdoor adventures, including stunning views, a handful of hiking trails, and visitor centers. There's very few crash sites in North Carolina, but one of them is found deep on this trail running beside a ridge. Oddly enough, you can make a whole day trip out of visiting the abandoned aircraft, but getting to the plane is no simple task. There's 3 trails in total that you have to follow in order to get to the wreck site. It's also recommended that you travel with a buddy, since it's so easy for someone to get lost in these woods. There's many steep drops and difficult terrain along the way too. On the night of November 24, 1983, the plane was traveling to Silver when it ran into some undefined precipitation with low-lying cloud cover. Just before 6 p.m., the aircraft crashed into the remote North Carolina woods, killing both passengers on board. Unfortunately, the plane went down about 11 miles from its intended destination. It was a Cessna 414A, a small plane with 3 wheels and a pointed nose. Due to the rough terrain in the region, the engines were the only things that were salvageable from the wreckage, and the rest of the aircraft was left to decay on the mountainside. Which abandoned site in the woods did you find the most interesting? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.